They have like
Get
no
ready.
ults for it either. All they have is
The Rejuvenator is
Holy fuck. Movie, cinema. Holy fuck. Alright. Hello everyone and welcome to another build video. Today we're going to talk about my hybrid Warden build, which I have fully annotated. I've put a lot of work into this build. I've been playing a lot of Warden in the past couple of days. Let me show you how that's gone. I pretty much spammed Warden yesterday and I won almost every game, losing only one game. So I played 6 games playing this build, only lost 1. And even the game that I lost, you know, I had a pretty okay performance. Not great, not terrible. And so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of this build at this point. Now, I want to start off by just saying that this is not necessarily like the most optimal Warden build that there is out there. There's always a lot of ways to play. And the reality is the best builds are always going to be adapted to the game. So when you follow a build from a creator or from a high-level player like myself, you're always going to need to think for yourself a little bit. My goal here is just to give you an idea of when I go certain items, when I skip certain items, and how to play the build. Some people have commented from previous videos that I didn't give enough gameplay tips, and so I'm going to try to give more in this video. So let's get started with the overall philosophy of this build. This is essentially a hybrid Warden that is a bit more ult focused than it is gun focused. You only get certain gun items for the value, but really it's much more ult focused than it is gun focused at the end of the day. There is some flexibility within it, so if you feel like you need to do more gun damage or if like they have counters to your ultimate, you can transition more into that, and so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just know that, you know, the build is a little bit more orientated towards the ultimate. This build is meant to abuse lightning scroll, which I think is a very strong item and also like just enables you to win fights that sometimes you have no business winning, especially with Warden. You know, you're hitting a lot of people with your ult, so you're just proccing lightning scroll on everyone, and it just gives you that little, you know, boost that Warden ult didn't have previously. 2 things changed really to make this build better than it was in previous patch. So in previous patch, decay was a 1250. And so you could buy decay and heal bane and essentially have like, you know, 80-90% anti-heal on a target for only 2500, which kind of killed this build because even if you had debuff remover was 4250, and then on top of that multiple people would have decay, which made this build a lot worse because you couldn't really sustain. Now that in general anti-heal has been nerfed a little bit, right? And on top of that, it's a little harder to obtain. And right now in pubs, a lot of people aren't buying enough anti-heal. You can really take advantage of this opportunity and build into the ult Warden and kind of feel unkillable in fights just because of how much you're healing from it. Lightning Scroll also allows you to chase people down really effectively. It's a tool that Warden was missing a little bit before. On top of that, Arcane Surge being a 1600 is a massive, massive boost to the ult Warden build, as you don't need to invest as much in reach as you did previously, at least in my experience. This item gives you enough range and duration on your ult to the point where I don't feel like you need to invest any more into it. And also like Mystic Slow being cheaper as well, right? You just get so much slow on this build. It just feels much, much, much nicer to chase people down. So that's the general idea. Now let's go into the specific items. So for lane, pretty simple. Headshot booster. There's annotations on every item, so I'm not going to explain everything in profound detail, but I'm just going to go over the ideas. You can read the annotations. Headshot booster is really for poke and lane. It gives you 50 headshot damage every 6 seconds, which is a lot of poke. This is essentially probably the best weapon item in lane at the moment. Monster rounds is once you get wave priority, you want to try to shoot their tower as much as possible. Towers die pretty quick right now, and so this item allows you to really take the tower quickly. Extra health, just to give you a little bit of tankiness. If you're taking a lot of damage, you might want to opt for extra regen instead of extra health early, and then build into extra health after. Because having more health is not necessarily that beneficial if you're, you know, constantly hurt, so extra regen might be better. Mystic Burst, you should buy once you have 2 points in nade. Do not buy before because it won't do anything. It'll be completely useless if you buy it before, so make sure you have 2 points in your alchemical flask before you buy this item. Extra Stam is just a nice item that builds into Arcane Surge, which is very strong. And then Quicksilver Reload helps your farm, and it also just, you know, helps you shoot, harass a little bit more, gives you a little bit more poke damage on your flask, right? Once you have 2 point in flask and you have Mystic Burst Quicksilver Reload, I'm just going to use the flask right here. You can see I'm doing 223 damage per flask, so just a lot of poke, and it gets very hard to deal with once you have these two items. Lane regen is always situational, so it depends. In an ideal world, you don't want to buy either of these items if you don't have to, but if you have to, extra regen is good if you're taking constant poke. Healing right is good if you're getting very low. You will have to sell both of these items later for slots. Now in the mid game, this is not necessarily ordered, so buy based on what you need. The biggest spike for your ultimate is Arcane Surge. So if you want to use your ultimate to, let's say, take a tower, you can consider just buying Arcane Surge right away, using it, and then using your ultimate. Fleetfoot is great if you need movement speed and chasing people down. Also gives you 125 bonus health, which is a ton for a 1600 orange item. Opening rounds is one of the best hybrid items, in my opinion. It gives you 7 spirit power and 40% weapon damage against targets that are above 50% health. This also helps you farm significantly faster. So I really like this item. You don't necessarily need this item. So if you feel very constrained on slots and you want to explore other options, this item is replaceable because all it's doing is giving you damage. So it's not fulfilling any necessary role within the build. Fleetfoot and Arcane Surge are not skippable. You need them 100%. Fortitude, like I said, this is not in order. A lot of the time I'm going to buy some of these items, like the slow items, which I'll talk about in a sec before. But this item just allows you to never go back to base. Sometimes if I'm just 500 HP and I don't want to go back to base and I have the money, I'll just buy it just so I can stay active on the map and keep farming. Mystic Slow is nice because it builds into Lightning Scroll later, but I wouldn't prioritize Mystic Slow over Slowing Bullets or Slowing Hex. Speaking of which, generally because of slots, I find that you can't build both if you want to be able to build other things. So it's either Slowing Bullets or Slowing Hex. If you like going into gun a little bit more, what you can do is you can buy Slowing Bullets and then Mystic Slow as well, and you get a similar amount of slow. However, depending on the game, this may not be efficient because if they have abilities to escape your combo, for example, let's say they have Mirage Tornado or Wraith TP or things like that, or Infernus Flame Dash, then the fact that they're slowed is not necessarily going to be quite enough. So this depends on the game. Buy whichever you prefer. You can technically buy both, but you will be limited on slots. If you want to buy both, you probably have to let go of opening rounds, so you're going to lose some damage, but you're going to gain a little bit more slow. Now, I want to talk about the greed option, which is Cultist Sacrifice. This item is pretty decent. If you buy this item, you have to hit it at a very specific timing. I would aim to get this item right at the 8-minute mark when the tier 3 monsters spawn, and you essentially want to eat one right away. So the best thing you can do is go into the enemy jungle and essentially steal one of their tier 3 creeps and just eat it right away. And it'll give you kind of a decent amount of boost in net worth right away. Because you'll be eating them and getting extra value. So you'll probably get an extra, 500 souls right as you buy it, and you don't have to farm. So it's pretty nice. And the stats are also all quite good for Warden. Ability range, fire rate, and bonus health are all nice. The biggest disadvantage of this item is 1, when it's on cooldown, this item is completely useless. And 2, when you need active slots, this item can become an issue. So if you have Majestic Leap, Slowing Hex, and Fleetfoot, this item takes your last active slot, which means if you need to buy debuff remover, you essentially can't. So if you buy this item, that's why I say a lot of the time you can't afford to buy Slowing Hex, because you're going to need to buy debuff remover most games, because the biggest counter to this build is Decay and Spirit Burn, just strong anti-heal in general, which you need to be able to remove if you want to be able to play the game against good players. Now, if they're not buying these items, you don't actually need debuff remover, but just know that if you're buying Cultist Sacrifice, as a preventative measure, I would recommend not buying Slowing Hex, because you simply don't have the slots for it in your active items. Now, Majestic Leap and Lightning Scroll are very strong power spikes for this build. Do you need Majestic Leap? You don't necessarily need it, but it makes it a lot easier to play the game. How you use Majestic Leap is essentially you'll leap into the air, you'll cast your ult, and then you're going to go down with Majestic Leap, and you're going to be on top of people. This item is a huge positional advantage on top of the fact that it gives you a 300 barrier that lasts for 8 seconds. And Warden, is already stacking barriers, so it's pretty good on Warden, and I like it. If you don't like this item, you can buy Superior Stamina instead. It's an option, and it helps you with positioning as well. And it's a great item in fights, so depends on what you prefer. I would generally aim to get Majestic Leap as you max your ultimate, so I'll go over the AP ordering later in the video, but that's usually when you want to hit the timing. Right around your max ultimate, you want to buy Majestic Leap, and then you're very strong in any fight. And you always want to Arcane Surge before you Majestic Leap, so your combo should look like this. You Arcane Surge, then you Majestic Leap, and then you're going to cast your ultimate in the air. Let me do that again since I didn't have it off cooldown. Arcane Surge, Leap, cast your ultimate, go on top of someone, and then use your abilities on them. And since you've Arcane Surge before you've leapt, you're going to get the bonus range and duration on your ult. As far as lightning scroll goes, this is a huge power spike because it'll stun people and do bonus spirit damage on them. Now the bonus spirit damage is nice, but it's not necessarily that huge, right? You can get a lot more damage going certain other items. It's really for the stun that you're buying this. So this will interrupt any channels, which makes you like very good at counter initiating, right? Like imagine that they have big team fight ultimates like Dynamo or Mo and Krill or things like that, and you just hop in there with your ult on lightning scroll. You'll be able to interrupt these ultimates, and it makes it really awkward for them to cast. This can be debuff removed, and so that is something you have to take into account. What I would recommend is that you look to buy lightning scroll right before a big fight occurs. So if you know, for example, buffs and earn are spawning in a minute and you have like almost enough money to buy lightning scroll, just save up and buy this item and show up to the fight. The moment you get this item, you want to look for a fight because you're very, very strong. So if you know like a mid boss or like a walker fight or anything like that's going to happen, try to time lightning scroll with that, as it's a very strong power spike. As far as any other item within the build, there's a lot of different options you can go. Kevlar is great because it gives you ability, duration, spirit power, and barrier, so survivability. It's really good. If your ult is getting a lot of value and you just want something to make your ult a little stronger and make yourself a little tankier, Kevlar is a great option. Colossus is just general tankiness, and it also slows people near you. You're already stacking slows in this build, so it's not really that good because slows do stack diminishingly, right? So let's say you already have slowing bullets and mystic slow, or slowing hex and lightning scroll, which is mystic slow, then Colossus slow is not going to get as much value. Unstoppable is really good if you're getting stopped by certain things, whether you're getting CC'd, grabbed, doesn't matter. Counterspell is helpful if you want to parry certain abilities, like let's say you're getting lash ulted away every fight or something and you don't want to spend all the money for unstoppable. You can just buy counterspell, parry the lash ult. That's an example. Debuff remover, as I said, is going to be mandatory in most games. If they're good players, they're going to buy decay, they're going to buy spirit burn against you, and you're going to need to buy debuff remover in order to play the game with your ult. Spirit resilience is very strong, especially if you're getting nuked by spirit damage. A lot of the time, gun heroes can't really afford to just sit there and shoot you when you're ulting, so most of the damage you take is spirit. But if you are taking mostly gun damage, I would say instead of buying weapon armor, just buy plated armor. Plated armor is really, really good against a lot of heroes. Like if you're struggling with Haze and Furnace or even Wraith, I would say that this item is just very good and makes you tanky. As far as the big damage items, Crippling Headshot and Magnum are going to be the most common ones you're going to buy. Crippling is still just a really good item for Shred and also anti-heal, and Magnum is just a nice upgrade from QSR, gives you more fire rate and gives you some extra damage on every shot. Spellslinger and Lucky Shot, I would say most games you're not going to buy them. Only get them if you're a little bit more invested in gun. It has cooldown reduction on Spellslinger, which is kind of nice. I just noticed I was forgetting an item. Essentially, at the bottom, I have a bunch of items that are good if you have slots open. So these are items that I know are good, but I'm not sure how to slot depending on the game. But some games I'll buy one or multiple of these items depending on how many slots I have open to me. Superior cooldown, obviously, is really good because you're ult Warden. And so reducing your cooldowns is fantastic. Burst Fire is good because it gives you movement speed. Headhunter is good because it gives you movement speed as well as heal and bonus damage. Essentially, a lot of these items you'll notice give you movement speed in some way, right? Almost all of these give you movement speed. Surge of Power gives you movement speed. Backstabber gives you movement speed when you proc it. Enduring Speed, obviously speed. Juggernaut as well. Headhunter, Burst Fire. These almost all give you movement speed, and movement speed is very important on Warden so that you can chase people down during your ult. Lightning Scroll does help you with that, as you already have a lot of slow, so you don't necessarily need to move that fast. But if you want to catch people that you haven't hit yet, moving really fast helps a lot. Now let's talk a little bit about the way that you should look to play this build. Essentially, the way that you should look to play this build is you look to play with your ultimate and you look to show up to fights, and you can initiate the fights if you want. I'll show you a couple clips right here of how you can look to play this build. So one thing I want to mention about this build is that if you find yourself, here's the first clip. First of all, if you find yourself in a situation where not much is happening on the map and you just want to get a little bit richer, it is possible to farm with your ult, and it's fully viable. Now, of course, the cooldown is a little long to be doing that, but sometimes if you just want to scale and you kind of want to carry the game, which a lot of the time with matchmaking, I kind of have to do because I'm put in lower rank games where the game kind of expects me to carry, and then I'll use my ult to farm. This is kind of what it looks like, right? So you're always going to want to Arcane Surge before your ult, and then you pop it. And as you can see, you farm fairly quickly if you pop your ult. You'll essentially clear the tier 3 camp right away. And so if there's tier 3 camps to clear, feel free to use your ult. This is not like a recommended usage, right? But a lot of the time this will help you just get really far ahead early. And so it can be like a decent way to use it. As you can see, it's going to be up in 45 seconds again. So the trade-off isn't necessarily like super big if you know that it's unlikely you're going to get into a big fight soon, because, as you can see here, I'm just kind of sitting in the side lane. So here's the next clip. One thing I want to mention is that with this build, especially if you hit a power spike, so here I used my ultimate like I think 2 or 3 times to farm, and on top of that I went cultist sacrifice. So as you can see, and I was given a side lane, right? If you look at the souls, I'm incredibly rich. Of course, this is like kind of like a best case scenario, and like I went full greed, right? I have 0 green items here. This is not like super realistic, but I do still want to use this clip to showcase how easy it is to take walkers with this build. It's very hard for people to contest you, because if you arcane surge and you have max ult, your ult lasts for so long and it does so much damage that you can essentially just arcane surge, ult on top of a walker, and you know, the people just kind of have to watch you take the walker without being able to do anything. And side walkers die especially quickly now, right? So you can just use your ult, get the walker, kind of reset. And you know, the whole philosophy of this build is you use your ult to do something that's valuable, and then you're just gonna chill for a little bit until you have your ult again, because you're a little bit weak during your ults, right? So that's the window that you're weakest, is when you don't have ult. Now this is an example of how you want to use your ult in these fights, right? So a lot of the time it's good to kind of bait your team and counter engage. So ideally you want to show up the fights that are already happening and use leap. So as you can see here, I'm positioning myself to flank the enemy team from behind. I see that there's a fight that's going to happen mid, so I'm just kind of waiting to see for the fight to develop. And once I feel confident, I also don't have my ult for 10 seconds, right? And once I feel confident, I'm going to leap behind them while channeling my ult. So I'll just let the clip play out. So here I arcane surge, ult in the air, go in. I'm just under the walker, but realistically, doesn't really matter. I was decayed, right? So I take a ton of damage. And so this one didn't really work out as well as it you know, normally would have, but I still did a lot of damage to them. And if I was a little bit smarter this game, I would have just bought debuff remover instead of cultist sacrifice. This is kind of like what I was saying, where you can't buy it because you have slowing hex. This is actually the game that I really learned this. But yeah, if you have debuff remover there, not an issue. And that's kind of how this build is meant to be played. Now I'll show you guys one last fight here. So obviously we're up about 11k, which I don't think is a crazy lead, but this one, my build is fully online. I've got debuff remover. I ended up selling cultist sacrifice. I've got lightning scroll, all these other items. And once again, I kind of do a similar play. I see a fight mid. I opt to go behind them, and I'm going to try to, you know, clean them up. I made sure to arcane surge before doing this here. And then I go behind them. I leap. And essentially, now that I have debuff remover, there's really nothing they can do. The moment that I get the K on me, I'm just going to remove it if I even get it. And as you can see, you really don't have to care about much in this build, as I'm just going to clean up. And you know, I'm very far ahead this game, but even if you're not very far ahead, once your items are online, you can do a ton of damage in these fights. And especially if you're not playing against very, very good players, this build feels pretty much uncounterable. Now there are counters to this build, like buying a lot of anti-heal and just positioning better, kiting the ultimate, etc. But you know, in most games, people won't really be able to do that, and therefore you'll be able to pop off. That's about it for the build. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the clips and if that helped you kind of like visualize how to play the build in an actual game. And you know, let me know how it goes. As always, I'll put the build ID in the description below so that you guys can check it out. I put a lot of work into this build and I did a fair amount of testing. So I hope that this works out for you guys. I think this is a very, very strong build, and I hope you guys will have fun with it. And maybe if enough people play it, maybe this build will get nerfed. I'm not sure. But anyhow, have a good one.